So welcome to the Starting Pixel podcast, everyone. Or as my new producer says, what I should say is, hello, fellow pixeliers. No, God, I can't even get it right. I can't do scripted. This is the most hilarious thing. Hello, fellow pixelnauts. That's the thing. And this camera's doing my head in as well. So one of the really interesting things about films at the moment is the brilliant use of car scenes. And I think I had a conversation with someone yesterday who said that they've just been seeing such really, really good car chases or car scenes, most recently in films. And one of the reasons for that is because virtual production, the use of LED walls in a car or a vehicle in those studios means that you don't have to shut down streets, you don't have to drag cars around on the back of low loaders. You're not sort of worrying too much about the elements because you can do all sorts of things with that. And that means that you can then be creative about what you can do with the camera as well. So I thought we'd get our next guest on to talk about that side of virtual production. So welcome, David C. Smith.
Pleasure.
From Plates Pro.
Yes.
Welcome. So let's get cracking. So what are driving plates? What is a driving scene? How does it all work? What's going on?
Sure. I think your opener kind of set up the scene very well. Driving plates and how it works within, whether it's visual effects or virtual production, basically gives us an opportunity to create the illusion that a performer is moving through space, driving through the world. Oftentimes that's in a car, that could be in a spaceship, on a boat, any subway, anything along those lines. But we're creating the sense of movement where it's an illusion, not a reality. And that's usually created by doing what we do, which is to shoot a moving environment with an array of cameras out in the world, and then reproject that environment on a controlled studio space. So most of the time these days, it's often LED. We've been in the game long enough that we were there for its popularity in green screen compositing as well. And actually, we're seeing an interesting hybrid approach now where we're finding that pendulum swings back and forth kind of season by season, year by year. But basically, that's the core of it. We go out into the world and we film the moving environment to bring onto a sound stage to then put behind an actor to make it feel like they're in a far-flung location, or maybe just down the street, but it happens to be a different season, or we're a rain cover set, or there's a multitude of reasons why doing driving process work on a stage is advantageous to a filmmaker. And so our goal is to make that process as believable and real as possible.
I thought when you said you've been around long enough, I thought you were about to start talking about a Police Squad and James Bond.
Sure.
And Buster Keaton, and because that's really
Absolutely.
where, I mean, it's not as if this is a new thing.
No, this technique is almost as old as film itself. It's just a matter of how do we advance the process, and how do we take advantage of newly developed techniques, tools, and technologies and put those to bear to make it. We used to always have a joke early on in the company, and we would even have some marketing materials around, we're trying to get rid of Toonces the Driving Cat from Saturday Night Live, which is kind of the puppeteered version of it that is very non-believable. We used that material until finally Saturday Night Live called us and wanted to be a client. And then we realized that maybe we should find a different example. But yeah, we're trying to use techniques and technologies to make it feel more real, to make it feel like it's the real actor in the real scenario. And the gold standard for us is films like Tom Cruise in Reacher, where that was the actual actor driving in a real scenario, because that he as a performer has the driving skill to be able to pull off those amazing stunts. Not every actor has his capabilities, so it becomes our job to try and bridge that gap. But we're always striving to have that level of believability and realism.
So, interesting. So taking it back to what we sort of joked about Alfred Hitchcock and all that sides of things, set up using that as an example, because everyone knows that it's fake, right? And then as a sort of step, we had a previous conversation we had before here. It's really actually quite difficult now to differentiate unless you sort of know that's an impossible camera thing to do with a vehicle. They must have shot it on a stage. The fakeness of Hitchcock's, we sort of all see that in our minds. Just quickly, briefly say what you'd have to do to recreate like that one Hitchcockian sort of driving plate.
Yeah, a lot of what you're dealing with is lighting, geometry, perspective, and honestly, performance from the actor. So the geometry piece of it is one of the things that the Hitchcock style of rear projection would often get wrong because they had a limited amount of adjustability. So you have a one projector, you send a cameraman out on the back of a truck, and he films one point of view looking behind the fictional car at downtown Los Angeles or whatever the environment is. Bring that onto the stage, and if there's a mismatch between the angle, whether it's the height, what angle of view, the direction of travel, if there's any mismatch between the foreground camera and the previously photographed background camera, that mismatch is going to read as something in your inner lizard brain that tells you this isn't real, this doesn't work. And it's really difficult when you're just dealing with rear projection, or even worse, an optical where they were actually merging those footage as a matte later, where on
Right.
set you didn't even have the ability to see if your geometry was lining up. So in green screen, that's a similar challenge. Unless you have a compositing tool on set, which oftentimes they don't, there was a limitation to how much you could judge if you were getting your angles correct. That's so now we're working with the modern technology of, for us, shooting 360-degree plates where every angle is captured simultaneously, and you can then choose that perspective with a great degree of precision. Now we can fix that error.
Got you.
Lighting, interactive lighting is another place where is the lighting of the foreground matching and logical to the environment of the background.
Got you.
So
'Cause
LED helps us fix that as well. And then
got you.
performance, the third piece is, does the actor believe that they're doing what they're doing? So if the entire dialogue scene has the actor having the conversation while driving like this, and we're now 3 minutes into the conversation and he hasn't run over a pedestrian,
I always, yeah,
that's a
that always
problem.
winds me up. That always,
Yeah,
I always get fearful
right.
of the pedestrians or they're about to have an accident. It's because so I get they've got to look at the road in a minute. So just going quickly back to the Hitchcocking thing, so from my perspective is like, yeah, I mean, when you saw it for the first time, you've never seen it, it's believable because that's the way it is. But the difference, the stark difference between then and now is the camera, right? It's like locked off. You couldn't move it because there's no what's it called?
Parallax. Yeah.
Parallax, right? So you just can't. So that's the different things. You sort of talked about the sort of the new technologies, and so briefly talk about what on earth the 360-degree plate is as well,
Yeah.
right?
So the phrase we use that most people now have a touch point to is Google Street View. So if you think
Right.
about Google Street View, we're doing Google Street View on steroids. So we're taking the idea of putting a car in the middle of a lane and driving it through open city streets. But instead of filming one frame every few feet, which is what you get on Google Street View, we're shooting it at with multiple 8K cameras, all pointed in every direction, shooting very high fidelity, very high resolution, very high quality imagery that we merge together into one basically seamless file when you're done. So that file can be represented just like when you go on Google Street View and you can click your mouse and look around and see, okay, well, what's the view behind the car? What's the view to the right, the view to the front? You can do that same thing on a virtual production stage or in green screen in the compositing software, to be able to rotate the world around and then match our perspective from our plate car to the perspective of the cinema camera that's on stage.
So, without that, you would have to, rather than you mentioned the sort of the cameraman on the back of the truck back in the Hitchcockian one, and that's just taking that back perspective. If you were to try and do that without a 360, what you and correct me if I'm wrong, you'd have to get all of have to get all of those camera angles right on that truck or that rig and driving around pre-planned. So the DOP would have to decide that or he or she will, he's going to do one straight on and one through the side and one at an angle and one from the back window coming in. All of
Correct.
those things would have to be done. But with a 360, because it's sort of, I guess, physically, it's almost like a section of pipe, right? It's like you've got all these things that go round, and then the DOP can actually just move the camera however he or she wants that on set. So it brings that sort of creativity, the options of creativity on set to be there,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and the creativity and then also to make sure that it matches. So I can show you, let's
Yeah,
see
yeah.
we've
Yeah,
got the, we talked about the screen share possibility. So let me see.
Do it. It
If
should be somewhere.
this is going to work. Let me drag this down so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, photos. Here we go. Oh, that's all right. Okay, so I'm not going to share the audio just in case something pops up. Okay, did that work?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we can see that.
Okay, good. So what we're looking at here is from our website for Plate Pros. This is a library plate. At least it will be if the internet participates. There we go. So this is a shot that we did on the Queensboro Bridge in New York. And you can see that we have the entire world present. And this is all in motion in 16K. So from this, if you were to imagine that this is the view outside of your actor's vehicle, and you were shooting a profile shot across the front seat, you can choose exactly what angle you want that profile to be. If we were shooting the other profile, it's all there. If we needed the windshield reflection, that's all present. So literally, it's not just the cylinder as you described. In our case, it's actually a sphere of content.
It's like a dome, half a tennis ball kind of.
Yeah.
Like a planetarium. If everyone knows what a planetarium is, right?
Yep.
And it's projected. So if I can explain it to the audio listeners. So we're basically looking, and David is sort of using the hand grab that you'd get in Photoshop or anywhere else and dragging it around. Basically, it's like a static picture. He's basically looking around the world. You can look up, you can look down, you can move it around to the side, you can look at the back, you can look above yourself. But it's not just one static picture. Actually, I guess you're filming this at what, 30 frames, 60 frames a second?
So everything we do is at 24, true 24, so 2400. We can easily knock that up to 25 for our European clients and then down to 2398 for broadcast. But yeah, so we do everything at 24 as the base.
So everything's there. So you're doing your where is it, your thing that you said is about Google Street View, where you sort of end up clicking to the next one, which is about 50 yards down the road. This is every single frame that you're getting at 24 frames a second. So it's probably a few feet, if that, probably, when you're driving at 20 miles an hour. I could probably do the calculations. I'm not going to. Okay, so what does that entail? I saw someone taking a picture of the rig or the car.
Sure, that happens out the window,
right? Because someone going, what's going on there? Sure. And I think you mentioned that you've got K cameras around or anything. So what does paint us a picture of what actually?
Sure. Well, actually, I'll pop back into share and I can give you exactly that. View photos. That should be it. Okay. So let me make sure that I got the right spot. So this is one of our array vehicles. So this we call Gen 3, as you see here. So this involves what's known as a 3-wheel autocycle. And we'll get into, there's very specific reasons why we use this crazy little geeky Batmobile. But this vehicle allows us to film in full 360 from a single array, keeping the driver below the frame. And it lets us get the same eye line as what a normal driver in a sedan would be able to see. It's a very, very low to the ground vehicle.
Right.
And so on this, in this case, this is 8 4K cameras. We also have a version of this that uses 4 8K cameras that is more what we would use for our library.
Yeah.
And so this, we're able to take around the country and around the world and film footage that we make accessible on our library that you can just license from us as stock footage. But then we also will appear on set, which is actually what some of these photos, this is for, it was a show called Royalty, which is now, that was the code name. It's going to be coming out, I think, the middle of this month. It's the Spike Lee movie, Highest to Lowest, with Denzel Washington. So this is us shooting some of the driving work for that film. So we'll also do bespoke plates where we show up on set and work with filmmakers to be able to provide specific content that's specific to their needs.
Got you. So just quickly for the audio viewers, so the vehicle was a tricycle with two wheels at the front and one at the back. So sort of it's a motorcycle, but it's not because they've got sort of flat wheels kind of thing. And then there was this sort of a rig at head height made up of, I guess it was almost a circle of cameras, but it really wasn't. All pointing in different directions, effectively, right? And that's pretty much how it was. So that's really cool. So you've shot all of that, which must be a lot of data. right?
So
That's a
it's
lot
an
of.
enormous amount of data. That I would say is one of our core competencies, is managing that level of data.
Give us an idea of what that, for 1 mile of road, what sort of.
Well, so I would say for a minute of driving.
Okay, it's a fast drive then for.
So one full kind of magazine for all cameras for us gets us about 45 minutes of recording, and that's just about 1.2, 1.3 terabytes of data.
Oh, okay, so not
So
actually a vast amount of data.
yeah, that's
But
that's at the capture stage, and then once we export that, go through the stitching process and put it in the delivery codecs, that sort of thing, that usually balloons a little bit. And so final deliverable for 2 minutes of driving of a 16K is going to be probably about 70 gigs, give or take,
right,
for 2 minutes of
okay,
driving. Yeah.
right, okay.
So it's not unheard of, but it is, if you think about how much you can shoot in a day, that can add up really, really quick.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, and so technical geek question. So you've got, was it 9, 10 cameras?
We have a
Uh,
variety of arrays that we use for different purposes. So on the lower side, it's 5 cameras. On the upper side, we've done as high as 17.
so yes, so let's take the average of 9 or 10.
Yeah, 9.
Do they all have their own? Is it literally just a card in the slot of in the side? Someone pushes the record button, or there's a central record button that triggers them all, kind of thing.
Yeah, we
And
build our own
got you.
electronics to be able to manage the cameras as
Right.
one unit, but yes, it is
So
individual recording.
got you. And then it's like the biggest SD card or the biggest CFast card, basically you
Sure.
can buy.
Yeah.
Like, and you stick that in, and then do that. Brilliant. Okay, so you've got that, and then there's a process of. You said that you've got to process this kind of. Oh, actually, one quick
Mhm.
question: what's the
Sure.
codec? That's always one of my things that I always forget, but it's actually
Sure.
most everyone cares about what the codec is.
Yeah,
Right
so
for
our
racing.
delivery codec is most often Notch LC. So that's the end of our pipeline, is either usually ProRes if it's going to production for visual effects, or Notch LC if it's going to directly to a playback vendor for work on an LED stage.
Right.
In terms of capture, it also depends to some degree which rig we're using, but we usually actually use a compressed codec. So it's often H.264 or H.265, specifically because we have so many cameras rolling at the same time. And what we found over time is that the benefits of the compressed format, one of the big issues, or one of the big benefits, is that the cameras that we use have really, really powerful denoising engines in the camera. So if we get the request all the time to shoot raw, and there is some instances where we will shoot raw depending on the circumstance. But when you're dealing with as much footage as we're creating, having a denoise step be necessary in the post process would radically slow down the pipeline. So
Yeah.
we choose to go compressed because the benefit of getting real-time noise reduction at the camera level, which you can only get through a compressed file, that is worth the slight challenges that a compressed format can create, is much less than the challenges that we would have from needing to denoise thousands and thousands of frames of footage just to start getting something to the to be
Yeah.
LED ready.
And your cards would be full up in a hell of a lot quicker time. It wouldn't be
Sure.
20 minutes, right? It would be
Absolutely.
probably a few minutes,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
So it's
As
one of
well.
those, anytime you're dealing with array photography, you're always balancing different metrics and what is going to be the right balance of trade-offs between, okay, if we do this, we might get this small benefit, but it's going to cause this larger problem. And so it's always a kind of a question of how are we going to thread that needle? How are we going to find the right balance? And so we've been doing this for a very long time, and we've now for thousands of productions. So I think we have a pretty good idea of where we can afford to make some compromises, frankly,
Yeah.
for the benefit of other things. And those benefits are sometimes not immediately obvious. So that experience is helpful for us to be able to go, okay, yes, we could do that, but do you really want to give up these other things in the process?
Got you. Yeah. And it is about, yeah, definitely. I think that was one of the things that would always frustrate me on set, was when people started saying, "Oh, we'll do one for safety." It's like, well,
Right.
like, really? You
Yeah.
don't really need to do one for
Yeah.
safety. It's
Absolutely.
like, do you really need to shoot in RAW? Do you?
Yeah.
It's going to be seen
Yeah.
on a phone,
Right. Right.
right? It's going on
And
LED wall.
especially for our driving, if everything is going according to plan, these are out of focus backgrounds, right? This is
Right.
something that is just like we were talking about in our previous conversation in the podcasting world, the background shouldn't be drawing its attention from the acting that's happening in front of it. And so everything we're looking to do is to make it believable so that the audience forgets it's even there. And part of that is that we get to benefit from the fact that it is 9 times out of 10 a blurry background that means that we don't necessarily have to achieve certain levels of quality. Now, there's other levels of quality that then become more important. And so we tend to adjust the design of the rigs to accommodate those thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's missed a lot as well. So you stitch these things together, and sort of create that dome as well, which is cool. How do you? Is there what is? Can you edit them? And the reason why I'm this sort of ticking through my head, my little head, is that you can only shoot on the sunshine on a sunny day, and you can only shoot the rain on a rainy day, and you can only shoot the fall when it's in the autumn.
Sure.
Sorry, bring in the end. Oh, yeah, etc. Right? But can you do anything with the file?
Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, we're creating video. It is just
Right.
another format of video. So all of the same techniques that you would have to manipulate any piece of footage apply. It is a little bit more challenging because of the scale, the size of the files we're dealing with, and the fact that we present them in this kind of strange format where we need to map a sphere onto a plane. So it's called equirectangular or lat-long projection. And you can think of it the way,
Rolls
if
off
you
the tongue.
remember, for me, when I was in elementary school, we had a map that would pull down in front of the chalkboard. So that maybe dates me a little bit. But that map was a representation of the globe. And that map is the same projection method as what we deal with. So that is a lat long, where you're taking the curved lines of latitude and straightening them out into a rectangle so that you can see the entire globe on a flat map. In this case, we're trying to see the sphere of every angle of view of the array, but then unwrapped and presented on the flat plane of a single piece of video.
Got you.
So there's some distortions that are involved in that are then removed in the reprojection where it's turned back into a sphere. But that makes it a little bit challenging to make edits. You have to understand how to work in that format. But
Right.
yes, we can do visual effects. We can add elements. We can remove elements. We can put snow on the ground. We can do all of those sorts of things in visual effects. And it's interesting, some of the generative AI technologies that are coming online. One of the things that we're investigating is how can we leverage those workflows to be able to make subtle edits to an existing plate, to be able to put snow on the ground or add leaves to trees that happen to be shot in fall, that sort of thing. But then the easy solution that's not high tech is just we go out in the world and we film all year round.
Right.
So that's the reason for the library is if it's, if your shooting schedule happens to necessitate you shooting in June, but the story is under snowy conditions, we can go, okay, well, we have a location that would double for what you're looking for that we did shoot last winter.
Right.
The library is the lo-fi way for us to be able to give that variety, but there is definitely technological solutions as well dealing with editing and compositing and those sorts of things. So all of that gets used.
Yeah, and I guess I'm just sort of thinking through sort of the typical shot block of a car scene. Person has conversation in front of vehicle, one person gets in vehicle, one person drives off, kind of thing, and that could either be done in a volume or it could be done live as well.
Yeah.
And then it is just a case of trying to find the best fit to your as you said, a lot of it's out of focus. As long as the hands are doing the right thing and the person's concentrating on the road, it's safe.
We're usually looking to create a similar tone with the background than a specific street address. And sometimes you do need that. There are certain circumstances where the character lives at 1355 Brown Street, and so we need a plate that shows that exact address. More often than not, though, you're just looking to make sure that the style of architecture feels correct, the style of what time of year feels correct, the vehicles in the background feel correct. So you can get away with quite a lot choosing something that's close, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a direct match unless there's a story reason why the plate becomes the focus.
Got you. I did a presentation with Carlotta at the Media Production Tech Show in London, where we went through the different flavors of virtual production. I think that we had 10 or 20 or 15. And we started off with, VP can be a static. It can be a picture.
Sure.
Stick a picture up on a big LED wall.
Yeah.
Someone can walk in front of it. You could have some art, practical props, etc., and it can look absolutely fine. And we went through, and when we got to driving plates, actually, I think I showed a picture of your rig. I didn't ask for permission. I
That's
think.
fine. Happy is out there.
Oh yeah, right. So I did share a picture of your rig, and with the cameras, and then we saw a couple of other instances of sort of driving plates. One was, I think, one was taken with a 360 camera as well, so you can sort of the 360, which I guess is another version of what you do, and there's probably compromises against those
Sure.
two as well.
Sure.
And then the other interesting one was actually, which I literally had not twigged with me, which was actually using Unreal to create a driving play as well, which then and again, it's all about compromises, right? Unreal's great for certain things, and to your point a bit earlier on about the reptilian brain, which is the sort of thing I know that I sort of point to as well. We're very clever people spotting these weird errors, the subtleties of stuff that we can spot instantly. But I just wondered what your experience of that is actually, and those sort of compromises between those three. I think it was those three. Did we think of another one? Definitely 360. There was definitely your one, and there was definitely Unreal. And so in my head, there was a fourth. But anyway,
Sure. That's fine.
what's the sort of compromises between those three options? If I decided to do driving plates, and I saw these three options, what are those sort of different compromises that you need to
Yeah.
weigh up?
I would add, if you're looking for a fourth, I would put a distinction between stitched and non-stitched on the plates.
Right.
So there is a long history of shooting plates where you have multiple discrete angles. Oftentimes it's 8, so it's forward, side, back, left, and then the fourth.
Right.
But those are kept as individual angles and then used. So you just kind of pick whichever one is the closest and then, massage it into place. With stitched, we're now pre-merging all of those angles together to create a seamless file that you can look in any direction and it's all there. So there is
So
a
quickly,
little different there.
just quickly, stitching, basically you've got one plate, which is one of those cameras, another plate, and you merge them together, and you can't see the join. Is that sort of
Exactly. Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there are certain circumstances where either one is appropriate. What we found is that stitched is the most compatible. Like you can use stitched in more scenarios where the individual flat plates will work for a lot of scenes. But if you're, especially a scene where you're having movement, if you're wanting to look out the front windshield, have the camera
Right.
pan around out the back windshield and then come back to the actor's face, those sorts of moves, really having all of the angles with no visible seam becomes really important. But the reality is, most car work is I'm looking at the actor's face, I'm looking across from one actor to the other. So there are kind of these standard coverage angles. And so flat plates do a pretty good job at covering those standard coverage. But as soon as you need to move the camera in more dynamic ways, it becomes necessary. And so for our company and the library that we've created, we've settled on stitched as the best solution, really taking curved wall LED volumes into account, because you have such a large world of LED to fill. We want to fill that in a seamless way. 360 cameras that are using kind of off the shelf cameras that you would, an action cam, say an Insta360 X5 or something like that, that is achieving the same result, but is doing so at a lower resolution than what we can achieve. So you can, and it absolutely works, especially if you're able to throw the background a lot out of focus. You can absolutely get away with putting one of those cameras out the window and get a plate that would pass. But you're not going to have as much fidelity out of two very small sensors as what we're getting out of 5, 8, or 17 large sensors. And then you get into Unreal, which is and I would say Unreal meaning any 3D rendered version of the plate. It could be Unreal, but it could also be a pre-rendered plate made in Blender or Cinema 4D or something. Going with a simulated plate has some advantages and has some disadvantages as well. Reality is very, very hard to synthesize by an artist. It takes a tremendous amount of work.
Yeah.
And the benefit of that work needs to make the work worthwhile. And in some instances, it can. One of the things that's really challenging for us to film with an array is what our clients often refer to as rural night. Can you give us a dark forest road with no other cars, no street lights, no house lights, and we just want the glow of the moon to backlight the silhouettes of the trees? That's incredibly difficult to capture, but would be pretty simple to create in Unreal or Blender. So a situation like that, it may be worth taking the step of making a procedural forest and lighting it with an infinite amount of moonlight, because it's really hard for me to get 50 Musco lights to line 5 miles of forest road, because that's the comparison. But
Come
for
on,
me
David.
to drive down a Brooklyn street with trash on the ground and believable leaves blowing and pedestrians walking up and down in period appropriate clothes, all of that becomes a much heavier lift for for an artist to create. So it's much easier in that case for me to just go to Brooklyn and drive down the road,
Drive down
and
the road.
10
Right.
minutes later I've got the footage done. So
Right.
there's a trade-off. Usually it's schedule, budget, and just the amount of creative effort necessary.
Yeah.
So there are definitely instances where you need that. Now, what I'll say about Unreal and virtual production in the way it's come to be known, where camera tracked multiple perspective virtual production, where we're actually getting that parallax effect on stage, that actually turns out to be not very important in a driving scene.
Right.
So normally with parallax, the majority of the parallax effect is seen within about a 30-foot or a 10-meter bubble around the action. Beyond that, you don't really see parallax very much. It diminishes
Right.
quickly over
Yeah.
distance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you think about an actor sitting in a car, the car itself becomes the source of parallax.
Yeah.
As the camera
Got you.
moves around the actor's face, what's really changing is the windshield and the A pillar and
Yeah.
B pillar behind them. So the phrase I like to use is, in a car, we get the parallax for free, because that context of the car's shell gives us the parallax, and the parallax being visible in the background plate is almost imperceptible. So if you don't, and that's the real benefit of Unreal, of the real-time virtual production process, is being able to get that kind of interactivity. Well, if that interactivity isn't really noticeable by the audience, we're going to a tremendous amount of effort to create a world that will generate that parallax, but that parallax isn't being seen by the audience. So you can create an end result that's as good, if not better, than you could create in Unreal. And it turns out to be cheaper, turns out to be faster. So for specifically car scenes where we're inside the car, I would argue that a 2D plate is more effective. As soon as we get out of the car, that whole thing changes. And now that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, and I suppose the only other reason you'd want to do it is if you had some sort of VFX going on, right? It's like and you wanted to have,
Or if the environment needs to be responsive to the actor. We
yeah,
need the actor to be able to pull over at an exact beat in the dialogue,
right, or
or
it
there needs
starts
to be.
raining, or there's the
Exactly.
lightning, or
Yeah.
something going on that's
Yeah.
someone needs to trigger all that kind of that VFX. If you want to get in camera rather than go to post, then you got green screen and you got all that. Yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So I see Unreal, the problem that Unreal, or really dynamic camera tracked virtual environments, the problem that solves in car work is, how is the car driving? Do I want to speed up? Do I want to slow down?
Yeah,
Those things that you can't really do in a plate, that's a problem that Unreal solves. But the reality is there's very few real use cases where those problems are challenging enough to make the juice worth the squeeze, right? To make the
yeah.
building of an entire world worthwhile.
Yeah, no, all I was just sort of, as my brain sort of ticking over as you're sort of talking about it, is simple things like sometimes shadows, a bit like the moon thing you said, actually, just having sort of the image, horror is a great one, right? It's like you suddenly there's this sort of silhouette of something crossing. That would be, then I guess it's not really about driving plates. It's really about that being that in-camera VFX thing that happens to have a car as a prop rather
Yeah.
than someone driving, right?
Yeah.
Or a car. So what about, have you done much things with, I don't know, have you looked at the Pixo Arika?
Akira.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Someone,
Sure.
one of us knows how to say these words. Have you done much with that? Because so for anyone who doesn't know, this is a bit of kit, bit of kit that I think that Pixamondo
Pixamondo, yeah.
created, that I'm going to use my hands, but I'm going to try and explain at the same time. It's like the fairground simulation rides that you used to get for flying fighter jets. So you'd sit in those things. If no one's ever done it, you'd sit in this cabin. It was on these sort of hydraulic rams, and you were strapped in. So it's a bit like a fairground ride without the fairground. You'd be strapped in, and when the plane dived down, it would tilt you, and then you'd go left and right and all those kinds of things. So if you can picture that, that's sort of what it is. But you can bolt an actual plane or a car or a jeep or a motorcycle or any sort of vehicle, a tuk-tuk. I think they did. I saw onto this thing. So when the actors in it, they're actually the gravity and inertia are sort of taking over as well, and they're actually moving about. So rather than like in the James Bond one where everyone was leaning over, kind of thing, and when they were going around the corner, lean now, you're actually doing it. And I think if I remember rightly, you have a controller that's on offset or is on the set, but is literally got a hat. He's actually driving this thing around as well. So they sort of control it. Anyway, so that's what the
Akira, yeah.
Akira is. What about, so have you done much with that at all?
We have a bit, and we're actually talking with the engineers that developed Akira for Pixo. We have a number of colleagues and friends at Pixomondo that have been part of that process. So we're very aware of, and I'm careful how much I can say, but we are definitely actively working with the Akira team to try and make sure that our plates are able to interface with the way Akira specifically is designed. But Akira fits into a lot of larger context of just motion bases in general. So there's things like Stewart platforms, which is uses hydraulic rams to be able to create 6 degrees of freedom. Akira is a little bit more linear in its design. It's designed really to articulate the suspension of the vehicle, which I think is actually a really smart design choice on their part. And so they've created kind of a cohesive ecosystem around not just the motion base, but also motion control, techno dolly or techno crane, so that the camera can also integrate and be programmed to move in conjunction with the motion base. So it's a really brilliant piece of kit they've created. But yeah, we've definitely worked on motion bases before. I can just a really quick example. There was a TV show called Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
And you could only do that with a 360 stitched
so
as well, right? Because
the 360 definitely helps, because if you're looking to move the camera around in more dynamic ways, you don't want to be worried about running off the side of your plate.
Yeah.
So this is from our demo reel. So this little sequence right here is using a motion base. This is a fairly simple motion base, but for Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the action sequence is a quick piece in a reel. They're able to, what we talked about at the beginning of the conversation about the lizard brain. If the world outside the car, and in that case, we're shooting a stunt driver driving our array vehicle, matching the stunts of the scene. So there's a lot of activity. We're making quick lane changes, sliding around corners, drifting the car, all of these kind of really dynamic vehicle movements. If your actor is sitting as still as I am now, and the environment is whipping around them, that's one of those disconnects that we talked about earlier. You need to feel the inertia of the car in the actor's body to make it be that much more believable, especially in a high dynamic action sequence. So motion bases like Akira allow the actor to not have to fake it. Like you mentioned, it's not Captain Kirk doing the lean right, lean left, just what you said. So that and it doesn't take much. You can get away with just a little bit of movement that really sells the effect.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yes.
Any piece of technology we can add another layer into the illusion just helps sell it even.
So what about flying plates? How does that work? Tell us about flying plates.
So there's a few variations on that. We have flown 360 arrays on drones. You can put them on traditional helicopter mounts. All of the ways that you can mount a single camera, there's a version of that where we can mount multiple cameras. So all of that's feasible. But I would say that flying plates, especially if we're just talking about clouds, that could be one area where doing it in some form of rendered world might make the most sense. Because you're not dealing with a lot of specific geometry, you can get away with making something in Unreal or in a 3D package that I think would rival, if not be superior to something we could go out and film.
Right.
So
Got you.
flying plates, because it is obviously such a challenging environment, that's a place where I think actual simulated plates, and we have a strong friendly relationship with a company called Simplates that is doing pre-rendered plates from 3D geometry. So it is a 3D created scene, but rather than being real time, it's actually pre-rendered. And they actually just came out with some sky plates, I think within the last 48 hours, that I think are really really beautiful.
Right.
So it is possible, but it's obviously more challenging.
Yeah.
But what you're finding is a lot of our work is driving, certainly, but we do a lot of subway work. We also do a lot of rooftop work where we're actually filming environments from cityscapes that can be placed outside of scenery. So outside the windows of your set for
Got
your
you. Right.
15-story apartment or something along those lines. We just did the new Karate Kid movie that came out a couple of months ago, where there's a 6-minute fight scene at the end of the film that takes place on a helipad of the rooftop of a building in downtown New York. The scene itself was actually shot in Canada, and we provided an incredibly high fidelity 360 environment plate that we shot from an actual rooftop in Manhattan to be able to fill a very large LED screen for the last 7 minutes of the film. So the climactic fight sequence is entirely in front of a plate on LED.
Got you.
So it's not just car work.
Interesting. Yeah.
We get into
Yeah.
a lot of it.
Well, that's the interesting. Yeah, it is quite interesting. I was thinking when you were sort of talking through the flying plates, and I was just thinking about shot blocks, and I guess it's your point. Why do something too complex when you could actually just hire a helicopter, I guess, and then because there are
Go do
very
it for real.
limited angle, there's sort of limited angles, right? When you're going to do flying plates anyway, you are looking out the front of the plane. You're not going to have camera movements too much. There's going to be a fight in the cabin because there always is, right? And the helicopters, there's not too much going on. Certainly, I think it was one of the most impressive ones I think I saw was it Drive with Ryan Gosling.
Mm-hmm.
I vaguely remember that, but having just this camera it must have been on a robot arm or something like that just sort of passed between the two faces as they were both looking forwards or something like that. Which it still strikes me as incredibly bit of innovative bit of cinematography, just to sort of understand all the tech. Do you find? I don't. We'll have to go in a minute.
Sure.
That's fine. It's just, do you find with all this technology that it's been adopted quite easily, or quite the opposite? It's quite difficultly. That's not even not a right word, is it? And
Sure.
what I mean, I guess, and just to expand on it, it's like I think we all feel, whoever's been in the sort of the virtual production world, is why aren't more people getting it, using it? Why does everyone think it's expensive? Why does everyone think it's all about an LED? Why, it's sort of about other things as well. What's your sort of experience of the traditionalists sort of coming across this ability to do these car chases in a warehouse in Canada?
Sure. So I think filmmakers as a breed have a tendency to be, we like new toys, we like new techniques, we like new technology, but we're also recognizing that we're creating a historical document that's going to outlive us if we make a good film. So we're making a film that 100 years from now somebody might watch. And so adopting a new technique is intimidating because you're worried if it fails, then 100 years from now they're going to look back and they're only going to see that you used a technique that didn't look good. They're not going to be impressed with the robots and the toys and the things. They're just going to look at the final product and does it tell the story in a believable way. And so long as this technology is in service of story, I think filmmakers will embrace it and will move it forward and will place demands on us as technicians to improve it so that it meets their expectations and exceeds their expectations and the expectations of an audience 100 years from now. So there's a lack of inertia. There's an inertia to stay still, where even look at when the Kino Flow light was trying to find its traction on set. There was 20 years of time that was like fluorescence cannot be used on a film set. And then Kino Flow, over just years and years and years of iterative engineering effort and marketing and convincing people, look, it really does work. Filmmakers begrudgingly went, okay, we get it. LED lights took over in a much faster way because there was real benefit that was able to be seen in the results. The results were there. And so you see that these new technologies, I think, get adopted a little bit faster now than maybe they did when I was starting out. When it comes to driving work specifically, what we found is that I owned a car process LED stage in New York for a couple of years. And so I'm speaking not just from the plate side, but also from a facility owner. one of the biggest challenges we ran into is actually who is doing the budgeting in this kind of work.
Right.
Where a line producer is looking at one set of the budget and is realizing, okay, if I shoot this on a car process stage with LED, I'm going to save a tremendous amount of money in green screen time if we're looking at LED over green screen. But the green screen budget was somebody else's problem.
Right.
So me as a line producer who's just trying to make my production budget line up, I don't care that I'm saving the other guy money. It's costing me money. So
Right.
that kind of the moving from post-production to production, the studio head or the showrunner is looking at the whole budget, and so they love it. But I don't know that that those decisions were always making it to the person who ultimately saw the big budget. It was getting caught up a lot of times in those intermediary, my department versus your department budget squabbles. And so I think that's an kind of baked in hesitancy that I think as an industry now, I'm seeing that people are getting past that, and the benefits are well enough known. There's enough projects that have been out where it's not just one or two tentpole movies that use this technique, but we're seeing it on productions at every scale. That I think we're getting past that point where people are starting to think about this in the early pre-production stages of not just, can I afford this, but can I afford not to do it this way? Because all of those savings now start to percolate through the entire budget. So that's a place that I'm hopeful, that I feel like people are familiar enough with it. And we always see driving as kind of the low-hanging fruit for virtual production. It's the piece that I think everybody hates being on a process trailer. So it's the thing that we can get rid of that. And in the process, we can start to understand how this new world works. And then it takes some of the intimidation factor out of virtual production. And then hopefully it expands from there.
Yeah. I mean, yes. And I think, we sort of said a bit earlier on, inevitably things get better, cheaper and easier to use. Right. I mean, that's the nature of technology and innovation. And I guess once it does become seen as a benefit, and then it's entrenched, right? It's entrenched in either the creative and the storytelling, even the script stage, or directors saying, "Oh no, these bits I know will work," rather than "Should we try?" There's at risk. Everyone's auditioning for their next job when you're doing anything. When you're a freelancer, effectively everything's an audition for your next role. So that, I mean, it is interesting, and the better the experience, I guess, filmmakers have shooting and using LED walls in as you say, the low hanging fruit of driving plates, we'll only ever sort of, I guess, then get them used to the idea of doing it in other ways. Brilliant. David, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Pleasure as well. I absolutely enjoyed it. Hopefully we'll have a chance to do this again. These are
sure. When you come over.
I want to commend you on what you're achieving with the podcast and also the community that you've created around Final Pixel. Like, it's been now a daily part of my research and is to be engaged with the community. So I really appreciate it. And
brilliant.
I'm honored to be on
absolutely. I mean, I did it out of sheer frustration of no one talking to each other. So I thought, I know what I'll do. And also learning, as I said to you before, it's like 8,000 hours of me looking at a blank screen, banging my head against the wall, and wondering, what can I do? I know, if I can find half a dozen people who know what they're talking about, I can ask them stupid questions, of which I still do.
As should we all.
Someone has. Exactly. Thank you so much.
Such a pleasure.
You have a great rest of the day. I'll see you soon, I'm sure.
Of course. Talk soon. Cheers.
Bye.